Well, good morning again. Welcome to the community experience, Home for the Future. And this year, our focus is going to be on young people who have been incarcerated or have touched the justice system as young adults or young children and are returning now. And there is a significant opportunity for us as co-laborers in this work to be supportive of these individuals and their unique needs. So welcome. My name is Reba Collins. I am going to turn it over to and introduce Roni Burkes-Trowsdell. Many of you know her. She is the Deputy Director over the Office of Reentry for the Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections. Woo! And her co-laborer in this work, Mike Garrett, who is the Deputy Director for the Division of Community-Based Innovation and Solutions for the Ohio Department of Youth Services. So I'm going to mute myself. I'm going to turn it over to them for the welcome and leading us into our first session. And now I will start to admit people, Roni. So thank you both for being here and giving us the energy and the launch that we are so excited to have. And then we will just keep going. Again, please mute yourselves. Make sure you're muted and off screen if you're not presenting. Thank you. Have a great day.
Good morning. Thank you, Reba, so much. I am, as always, so excited to be here. And so, welcome to the Building Bridges Community Experience, our reentry event. It is with immense pleasure and heartfelt enthusiasm, as you all know me, that I welcome you to the Building Bridges Community Experience Reentry event. I am, as Reba said, Roni Burkes-Trowsdell, and I have the pleasure of serving the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction and this great state of Ohio as the Deputy Director in the ODRC Office of Reentry. On behalf of Director Annette Chambers-Smith and the entire Office of Reentry for the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction, we are honored to gather with you this morning for this deeply meaningful event. We come together in shared purpose to build stronger, safer, and more equitable communities by supporting our justice-involved neighbors. This work is not only the responsibility of one agency, one organization, or one leader. Reentry is a community responsibility. And the strength of Ohio's reentry movement lies in its community-driven foundation. It's community-driven foundation that's powered by diverse partners working side by side. And that's what you're going to see a lot the next couple of days. Ohio is proud to be a national leader in reentry, not just because of our programs or policies, but because our work is grounded in community, voice, in leadership and engagement. The Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction and the Ohio Department of Youth Services are committed to supporting and empowering communities to be successful. And we do this by expanding access to education and workforce opportunities, engaging collaborative partners across sectors, influencing policy legislation and funding decisions, uplifting the lived experience of returning citizens, and maintaining an open, honest, and ongoing dialogue with the communities that we serve. This is the power of partnership, and this is how we build bridges that truly, truly last. Our guiding principles at ODRC, our mission is grounded in values that guide everything that we do. Take care of our staff, and they will transform our offenders. If we take care of the people who are out there serving in our facilities, serving in our communities, they will take care of the people that we have been entrusted to serve. One team, one purpose. Today, I think, is a great example of one team, one purpose. This event was put together by many phenomenal partners and who operated as one team. I said earlier to my folks, my friends at DYS, that I'm going to give you a shout out because we're one team. Our purpose is the same. Civility towards all. It doesn't matter what your role is within our agency, within this field. Everyone deserves to be treated with civility. And then hope is job one. And I think that is our most important core value, is that hope is job one. And the work of our many reentry partners is guided by the shared principle of respect, of integrity, collaboration, accountability, and innovation, all of which are reflected in the sessions, the conversations, the connections that you will experience for the next 2 days. So today you heard that we are here to look at youth reentry. I say to celebrate youth reentry because it's a critical priority. While adult reentry services receive much of the attention, we always talk about our adult folks who are justice involved, but we must never overlook the importance of supporting our justice involved youth. Their journeys home carry unique challenges as well as incredible potential. We extend a special congratulations and appreciation to Michael Garrett, who you'll hear from in just a few moments, and Yolonda Frierson, and the ODYS reentry team for their tireless commitment and groundbreaking work in this space. Michael, your leadership, Yolanda, your leadership, and your team continues to make a real difference in the lives of Ohio's youth and in the futures of our community. And I just want to thank you and say for that, we appreciate you. We must continue to provide trauma-informed, developmentally appropriate support for our youth. We must prioritize their healing. Hey, they're hurt, you all. We must emphasize mentorship. We must create opportunities. We must work with our young people, not just for them, but with them. And that is so important. Their success is our collective success, and their futures are too important for us to leave it to chance. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Building Bridges Community Experience, what you're going to experience the next 2 days, and I'm so excited if you can't tell. So this experience is more than just an event. It is a living reflection of our community to not work in silos, but work in community. And you're going to hear the word community a lot. It represents the collective heartbeat of Ohio's reentry ecosystem, where state agencies, nonprofit agencies, returning citizens, faith-based groups, law enforcement, families, advocates, all come together in one space to do this work. Throughout the year, this work has been, and Reba, you'll love some of my terminology, co-led by an incredible planning partners and committee members whose dedication, their vision made this experience possible, not only this year, but year after year. We offer our deepest gratitude to Reba, to the team. Thank you so much for your hard work, your leadership, and your unwavering commitment. So this year's 2025 theme is Home for the Future, HOME for the future. Hope, opportunities, mentoring, and encouragement. This year's theme is an invitation to reimagine what it means to support justice-involved individuals, especially our youth, as they return to our communities. It reminds us that home is not just a physical place, but a space of belonging, purpose, and possibility. As our dear colleague Reba Collins often reminds us, we become more deeply committed to our communities by being more deeply connected in community. Think about that. So let's continue to connect, commit, and collaborate for long-term success, for the long-term successes of all those that have been justice involved. So here's what you can expect the next couple days. Today, virtually, tomorrow, whatever session you choose to be at. I think I've been bragging that I'm going to be in Cincinnati with Trina Jackson and the Hamilton County Office of Reentry, but we have many wonderful sites across the state. Here's what you can expect. Educational sessions. Learn from the leading voices and explore the latest research. You're going to hear soon from someone that's going to share some great research, Dr. Diamato, and innovations and real-world strategies in reentry. Collaborative workshops. You're going to join sessions designed to generate practical, action-oriented solutions for both youth and adult reentry challenges. And we want you to be engaged in those workshops. We want you to be a part of them. We want you to ask questions, and we want you to take away something meaningful from each of them. And then networking opportunities. I'm excited about being in Cincinnati tomorrow. I've spent the last few years in Columbus as part of the community experience. But tomorrow in Cincinnati, I'm excited about connecting with others who are equally passionate about making a difference in this reentry space. I'm also excited about building new partnerships and strengthening our existing ones. And I hope that you are too. So Reba, I'm going to do a call to co-labor is what I call it, Reba. And I know you'll appreciate this. Now more than ever, we need more co-laborers. As Reba, this is Reba's term and I love it. She uses it all the time. If you ever get an email from Reba, she will call you a co-laborer. But people, we really need people who are willing to step into this work, not only as a participant, but as a leader, as a coalition builder, and as a change agent. We need you to be present. We need you to be engaged. We need you to be committed to creating opportunity and change. Whether you are seeking support for someone you care about, because we all know how we fight for those we care about, or looking to collaborate or ready to serve on a deeper level, the community experience is a space to begin that. So let us not forget, I said this earlier, and this is, I think, our most important core value. Hope is job one. Let's create hope in the areas that we serve. Our youth deserve every chance to succeed. And I'm going to say that one more time because I think that's so vital. Our youth deserve every chance to succeed. And I'm sure both Michael, Garrett, and Yolanda and their team can tell you many, many countless stories of where youth that they have interacted with did not have that chance to succeed, was not given those opportunities that some of us were given. So let's create a space where our youth can have every chance to succeed. And then together we can build bridges that last for generations. So we encourage you to get involved not only in this community experience, don't let it stop today, but you have many ways to get involved. We have Tom Lukey on here, who's the president of the Ohio Association of Local Reentry Coalitions. That is a way to get involved. Many of you know about our partner, relink.org. Relink is always searching for resources and ways to increase their resources and ensure that the resources they have on relink.org, I'm going to say that a couple of times so that you will go to their website and see there's a way for you to help them increase their resources. You can work with your local reentry coalitions. I've seen some of our coalition leaders on here already. I saw Lola Simmons in Youngstown, Ohio, and I know they're hosting an event tomorrow. You can help start a citizen circle in your community. We don't have citizen circles all over the state. We have them, they're really heavy in the north part of the state. We're really trying to get them started in the south part of the state. Help us start a citizen circle in your community. Work with the local and statewide reentry collaborations, other organizations, or advocate for policy development and reentry reform. Here's the point, your voice matters. Your ideas matter. There's room at the table for everyone who is ready to help create change. So in closing, I just want to, first of all, thank you for being here. Just thank you. Thank you for showing up, not only today, but every day for the people that we serve who need you most. Your voice, your presence, your dedication, each of those make a difference. So let us remember this. Reentry is a community responsibility. We are stronger when we work together. Ohio is leading the way in reentry, you all. Why not be a part of it? So together, let's continue to create a state where every returning citizen, young or old, is welcome, supported, and empowered to thrive. So welcome to the 2025 Building Bridges Community Experience Reentry event. Let's create impact together. Let's build bridges together. And again, I'm going to quote our dear friend Reba Collins in saying, becoming more deeply committed to our communities by being more deeply connected in community. Let me say that again, because I messed that up a little bit. I'm not perfect. Becoming more deeply committed to our communities by being more deeply connected in our community. I want to thank you and welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm going to turn things over to my good friend, Michael Garrett, who is going to talk more about the youth in our community and how you can help make a difference and what DYS has been doing to be change agents in the state and in this country. So good morning, Michael.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for that great introduction, and thank you all for being here. We always look for opportunities and embrace opportunities to partner with the Department of Youth Services and Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections. Over the last few years, especially coming out of COVID, that collaboration has been even stronger. I see Roni at different places and I say, hey, what do you got going on? Hey, we got this. And we share those resources. And then, hey, Roni, check this out. Look, we met these people over here. You might have somebody, right? We try to find something for everybody, right? And I think first, let me say thank you to everyone that made this event possible. It's saying something when this number of people show up on a rainy Wednesday afternoon to hear about reentry, right? Not the most exciting thing in the world for everybody, but for everybody in this room, it is. For everybody in this room, we understand it matters. I'm going to start with the statistic. 15 to 20% of our population in America are juveniles under the age of 18, 15 to 20%. But they are 100% of our future. So fathom that for a second. You've got only 15 to 20% of the people in this world, but they will account for every aspect of what our future looks like. Everything from trades to medical to even line service in a factory. They will account for our future. And we collectively as a state and we collectively as a team of professionals working to help young people overcome barriers and obstacles, this is a call to action for all of us. I think Roni has done a great job talking about hope. How do you know what hope looks like if you've never experienced it? And oftentimes, for me, looking across this room and seeing so many active community partners gives me hope. And I think that that's a part of this process that is oftentimes lost. We rely on one another to give each other hope. And that hope that we provide one another gets poured into another individual. At the Department of Youth Services, we have taken a very concentrated effort to really look at what young people need. And contrary to what I think many might believe is Department of Youth Services, well, we got a bunch of 15, 16-year-old kids we're releasing to the community. That is not accurate. In fact, the average age when a youth comes to the Department of Youth Services is 17 and a half. The average age when a youth leaves the Department of Youth Services is about 18 and a half. Average length of stay is about 15 to 18 months. And what we've seen over the course of the last few years is mandatory gun specification time has drastically changed the amount of time that young people remain in our system. This last year, the Department of Youth Services graduated over 100 young men. I mean, just think about that, 100 young people in the care of DYS. We have over 100 graduates sitting in our facilities right now that we have to get linked to skilled trades opportunities, to post-secondary education opportunities, to what do you want to do opportunities, right? Like, I think sometimes it's just as simple as, what is it you want to do, young man or young lady? Like, what is it that we can help you accomplish? That's the hope. But in order to bring the hope, we have to understand who we're serving. And oftentimes there's a disconnect with who we're serving and what their actual needs are. If their basic needs aren't met, you could have the best program in the world. And if the basic essential needs aren't met, that kid's not going to get to where they need to go. So some of the stuff that the Department of Youth Services has been focusing on are simple things like food, water, electricity, access to health insurance, access to health care, access to a vehicle to get to an appointment. We just recently partnered with Uber. It took us over a year to get the contract ready, but we now have the ability to send an Uber to get a kid to an appointment. No, long gone are the bus passes and some of those other things. We're finding ways to eliminate the barriers and get kids to the services they need. We've had some additional advancements with our Project Lift in the Cleveland area. We also have partnerships with the Ohio Department of, the Ohio Public Defender's Office. The Ohio Public Defender's Office has in the Cincinnati area, has a case manager that actually assists us with some reentry functions. We also just partnered with Buckeye Ranch to provide MST home-based counseling services for young people as they reintegrate into the community. But I say all that because those are just the tip of the iceberg of what kids need. We need more partnerships. We need more collaboration. Over the course of the next 2 days, you're going to hear from about 5 or 6 different presenters across the Department of Youth Services, ranging everything what we've done with our Trades Institute program, with creative ways we're using community correctional facilities moving forward, how we're going to use those facilities to give youth reintegration opportunities and employment opportunities before they leave our facilities. We are looking to scale that. We're looking for partners to grow that. We're looking for individuals that have creative programs or innovations that we haven't heard of yet. So for us on the DYS side, there's not enough work that we can do in a day or a week or a month or a year or even in this session. And I have to second what Roni said. Don't let this work stop today in some conversations. Tomorrow, when you go to those workshops, make the connections. The work we do, we are 100% hope, opportunity, mentorship, and encouragement. But one of the other E's is engagement. And we have to engage with each other. We have to engage with one another and engage our clients in a different way and help them walk this journey together. And not be the hammer and the nail, but be right alongside them, transforming the way that we do our work and the way that we reintegrate young people into our community. So with that, I am going to pass it to Miss Yolonda Frierson. Yolonda is currently transitioning into her new role as a bureau chief of our community engagement and reentry, but she's also serving as our chair of our release authority during that transition. So I'm excited to have Yolonda here. I want to say thank you all. I would say today is about building new relationships and partnerships. All this work we do is about relationships. We can find the solution to any need for any of our clients if we build the right relationships. We will never, ever have enough relationships in reentry. And I'm looking so forward to building relationships with all of you. With that said, I'm going to pass it to Ms. Frierson.
Thank you, Mike. And good morning, everyone. Good morning and welcome. Welcome to the first session in the community experience. The first session is entitled, What Works at the Intersection of Young Adult Criminal Justice Involvement and Reentry. My name is Yolonda, and it is truly a blessing to serve in my role and work with the young people in the state of Ohio. It's a blessing to work alongside of such phenomenal individuals that are really committed to doing this hard work. The work we do individually and collectively is critical to building bridges. It's critical to building community. Any one of us, any one of you can be the spark that a young person needs to change the trajectory of their life. We want to thank you for your presence. Thank you for the work that you've done. Thank you for the work that you are going to do moving forward. I am grateful for the opportunity to serve as your facilitator for this session. I would like to introduce your presenter for the session this morning, Dr. Chris D'Amato. Dr. D'Amato is a research associate for the University of Cincinnati Corrections Institute. As a research assistant, his main responsibility includes managing and leading research projects and training agencies in evidence-based practices. We truly appreciate the work that Dr. D'Amato and his team are doing. Dr. D'Amato has a great presentation prepared for you today. So without further ado, I present to you Dr. Chris D'Amato.
Thank you, Yolanda. Good morning, everyone. It is a great honor to be here and be able to talk with so many of you and at least get to see the names of everyone here who's doing great work throughout the state of Ohio. And so I'm excited to share with you guys a little bit kind of a background about, we'll label kind of what works in reentry. And I'm going to go ahead and pull up a PowerPoint slide to kind of guide my conversation here. So hopefully everyone is seeing some slides.
We can see, and just so you know, I will monitor the chat for everyone.
Sounds good. And I will kind of hop on and off the PowerPoint slides just to be able to kind of look at the chat too, because part of this presentation I do to hope to get some of your all's involvements. And so I guess this presentation, this topic is what works at the intersection of young adult criminal justice, involvement, and reentry. And what I'm really hoping to do today is to give you guys kind of like the high level overview of what research has kind of talked about, or what his research has shown is how do we go about making an effect in easing and giving our youth the opportunity to be successful when they get out of these environments and re-enter the community. And so to do so, I really have three main objectives that I'm hoping to accomplish. The first is to discuss the key challenges associated with reentry for young adults. Director Garrett was already kind of talking about that. So we're going to have a good conversation about what all those challenges are. The second is to overview the risk-need responsivity model. Many of you may have heard of the R&R model. My goal here today is to really just kind of give an overview of it and talk about how it still fits within this idea of reentry. And then finally, I plan to end the session talking kind of about the evidence-based practices that enhance reentry success. Before we get into the research of it all, though, I do want to start with some hopeful audience participation and ask you all two different questions. And so I'm going to put it on the screen here for a moment. Then I'm going to pull my PowerPoint off and monitor the chat for a little bit. So in the chat over the next couple minutes, I'm hoping you all can answer this question for me. From your personal opinion, what does it mean for an individual or a young person to successfully re-enter or reintegrate into society? So how would you personally say that you would call someone successful when they get back into the community? What would make them successful? Is my question for you all. And I will put it in the chat as well. To have a good support system, to feel welcomed and not an outcast by their community. I'm saying housing, employment, support systems, more employment, building relationships of supports, finding connections, self-sufficiency, support and resources, being stable. Awesome. Being aware of their external challenges, having support systems, intrinsic value, transitional housing, stable employment, basic needs met, developing a sense of purpose, to learn how to be an adult. Exactly. I'm seeing everything that I was kind of hoping to see within this idea. And so feel free to keep entering them into the chats to re-enter with the resources they need to have job skills, acceptance, all of that. And absolutely. And what research kind of has shown from both a measurement standpoint, which I know doesn't matter to you all that much, but also from a discussion standpoint of how do we know whether certain things are effective? How do we know whether or not people who leave these facilities are doing well? And I did want to mention here really quick, I meant to mention this in the last slide. So when I'm talking about reentry, I'm talking about reentry from some sort of institutional-like setting. So that can be juvenile or adult settings, jail, prisons, detention center, residential facilities, and so on. And so what research has really shown about what does it mean to be successful in reentry? It's really a twofold answer. The first is kind of the definition that I know many of you may not like as much, but on some level, it is one of the most important measures or ideas of whether or not someone's reentering society successfully. And that's kind of avoiding further harm, avoiding further criminal offenses, avoiding recidivism. So that is absolutely one way we want to measure whether or not someone's successful. But the other way is what you all have been talking about here. And it's very broadly for someone to re-enter society and feel as if they are supported and feel as if they have transitioned away from that supervision and feel as if they are now a functioning member of the community. And what that means is going to change for every individual person. It's not going to be the same for one person as for the other. For some people, that might be reconnecting with family and finding stable housing. For others, it might be finding the mental health and physical health support that they need to feel like they can be a stable member of the community. So it's kind of a twofold approach to being what it means to be successful in reentry. So great. And now I'm going to ask you guys another question of what are the challenges or barriers that young adults face when they reenter society? And I just went ahead and put it in the chat. So again, take a couple minutes and just any of the barriers from your personal experience that you've seen young individuals face as they are trying to reenter society. Stigmas, lack of support or guidance, resources, no parent support, addiction, ageism, no life skills, being labeled, stable housing, homelessness, jobs, exactly. Not having an identification, untreated mental health issues, no support, people, places, and things. We'll definitely get into that. This idea of risky situations, not having positive relationships, peer pressure, lack of education, feeling isolated, reputation. Awesome. You guys are hitting on all of the things that I was hoping to talk about. A lack of tools, jealousy from family members who resent helping for so long, no supportive family. Awesome. And not awesome in terms of the barriers. Obviously, those barriers are very severe and very hard to overcome, but it's awesome that in this room, we recognize it. And what I did when preparing this presentation was dive into research, dive into not just research, but not just numbers research, but qualitative research, interviewing people who have been infected by the system. And what we uncovered and what that uncovered is there are tons of challenges to reentry. And you guys just hit on a ton of them that are up here. And I'm not going to sit here and talk about each of these little things surrounding the stick person. But I saw these in the chat: stable housing, mental and physical health, issues around finances, access to resources. That's everything from basic needs like shelter and food and clothing, all the way up to, or not all the way up to, but including things like getting a state ID, having access to employment opportunities. Another thing that oftentimes challenges individuals are statutes, regulations, laws, policies, whatever you want to call them, at the local, state, or federal level. Things like restriction on housing for people with felony records or specific types of felony offenses. We see that a lot with individuals convicted of sex offenses. That can also be regulations that prevent certain companies from hiring people from felony records. That can be things like disenfranchisement, being unable to vote or participate in certain types of civic duties, things like serving the military or serving on a jury. Substance abuse issues I saw in the chat. I saw a lot about family and social support. That's everything from not having any family or social support or having a family or social support, but that's more of a negative influence on their lives. And then I also saw in the chat something that's been drawn out and researched majorly about young individuals in particular is that barrier that kind of naturally happens when someone goes off into the system. There's a lack of trust. There's a frustration potentially between the family members and the individual who's reentering society. Employment and education, legal system factors. So that's continued surveillance while they're in the community if they go onto parole or residential supervision. That could also be, hey, they still have some fines, fees, or restitution that they're facing through the court. And it could also just be, hey, the local police know who they are. And so they're going to supervise them a little more closely because they know about their record. Another one I really want to highlight here in this top left corner is developmental disruption. And that's a very, very broad topic, but it's one of the key findings in research about what happens to individuals when they get involved in the system in those early to late teenage years or younger 20s. And that's the idea that this time period in human beings' lives when they're aging from, I don't know, around 12 to about 25, there is so much development that goes on from a brain standpoint, from a cognitive standpoint, from a social standpoint, from a physiological standpoint. And just think about your own lives and maybe what happened during that time and how much you developed over that time. You learn things like you start forming your values and your beliefs. You start learning how to becoming a problem solver. You start learning job skills and educational skills that can help you transition into college or to trade school or to the workforce. And by getting involved in the system, that can disrupt and that can delay a lot of those progressions. And so that's a huge issue that individuals in the system are overcoming or need to overcome as they come out. And so really what research has shown is there's two very, very broad categories of challenges. And I also just want to note that there's probably another 5 to 10 different boxes we could come up with and put on this little stick figure. So this is not necessarily doesn't catch everything. So if there's some that are missing up here, there's probably is. I apologize, but this is just hopefully a good summary of the types of challenges they face. Well, with that said, there's kind of two categories of challenges that individuals face as they are trying to re-enter and become successful. And that is factors directly and strongly associated with offending behaviors. Typically, we refer to these as criminogenic risk and needs or crime-causing risks and needs. And the other ones that are just as important, but viewed in a slightly different way, are factors that act as barriers to reintegration or reentry, but are not necessarily directly associated with offending behaviors. And so that's the non-criminogenic factors. So the first ones really focus on kind of that first definition of success upon reentry, avoiding recidivism. The second one really focuses on that second one of becoming a functioning member of society in that broad terminology. But we need to figure out both of these things for people to ultimately be successful. And so how can we help is kind of the question. What has research shown us about how do we actually go about making a difference in improving the likelihood that the individuals that we supervise, the individuals that we work with, the individuals we provide treatment for, how do we go about helping them? Well, to probably no one's surprise on this call, or maybe I shouldn't make this assumption, there is an assumption that one can make that, hey, maybe we just need to punish these individuals and put them into prison, put them into jail, and that punishment will deter them from committing more crime. Well, research has shown time and time again that punishment on its own is not something that is effective at reducing recidivism and improving our kids' lives as they get out of the system. And so on top of the supervision that we provided these individuals involved in the system, we also need to deliver effective rehabilitative services to address those criminogenic crime-causing factors. Beyond that, though, we also need to identify and address the barriers to reentry and rehabilitation, those non-criminogenic needs. And then finally, we also need to identify and leverage what we call or can call protective factors. And protective factors are strengths in an individual's lives, positive things that are going on in their lives that can help them be more successful upon reentry or reintegration. And so in comes the risk need responsivity model, and thinking about where we want our youth to get to be successful when they come out, to feel accepted, to be a functioning member of society, to not get in trouble with the law anymore. We see all the challenges of reentry, that large circle of factors, all the factors you put in the chat. That's a big ask to try to help them get around that, all those factors. So how can we start doing that? Well, one potential starting place here, in comes the risk need responsivity, or the R&R model. For those of you who are very familiar with the R&R model, hopefully this is just a nice little refresher on that. For those of you who are unfamiliar with it, hopefully this is a nice introduction on it. I'm not going to dive into great detail on anything. This is just a nice overview. So if you do have further questions or topics about questions about the R&R model, I'm happy to provide you with more resources. But the R&R model is a set of principles that falls under this concept known as the principles of effective intervention. And what the principles of effective intervention are is a set of principles that have been shown through research and theory to be effective ways of working with individuals in the justice system. And the R&R model is part of the principles of effective intervention, and is really is kind of the hands-on guiding approach to how we work with individuals in the system. And the R&R model has 3 key principles: the risk principle, the need principle, and the responsivity principle. And the risk principle really focuses on who we should be focusing our services on. The need principle focuses on what we should be focusing on with our services. And responsivity focuses on how we go about providing those services. And so the risk principle tells us who to target. And the risk principle functions with this idea that we know that in the correctional world or in the criminal justice world, or really just in the society in general, we have limited resources, right? We don't have unlimited time. There's lots of people in the system. There's only so much staff. There's only so many rehabilitative or other types of services that we can provide to people. So we need to be intentional with how we spend our resources in this field. And what the risk principle tells us is we should focus on individuals who are at higher risk to recidivate. So individuals who are most likely to come back into the system. And we want to determine that with a risk assessment tool or a validated risk assessment tool, which is traditionally things like the Ohio Youth Assessment System, the OES, the Ohio Risk Assessment System, the ORAS, and there's plenty of other examples outside of the OES and ORAS as well. And what it tells us is that we should provide the most intensive interventions to higher risk individuals, and we want to avoid over-servicing individuals who are at lower risk of recidivism. Meaning that it's not that we want to ignore people who are low risk, not that we don't want to spend any time with them or don't provide and not provide them with any services. We just want to be careful and intentional about the amount of services we provide people. So I'm going to come off screen really quick and just have the chat interact for just a second and ask the question of why do you think research and evidence has suggested that we should focus our resources on individuals who are at higher risk? Basically, why do we want to spend more time with higher risk individuals than lower risk individuals when providing services? If anyone has a guess, feel free to put it in the chat. Otherwise, I'll just go ahead and talk about it. Yeah, exactly. Damien said they are most in need. They have the most barriers to address. Exactly. Safety as well. If you think from a public safety standpoint, they're the ones most likely to cause harm, to prevent reentry. And it's a trickle down. That's all true. And basically a very kind of crude way to say it is it gives us the opportunity to have the most bang for our buck when providing services. These are the individuals that are most likely to come into the system. Low risk people inherently aren't as likely to come back. And so low-risk people are more likely to self-correct. They don't have as many issues. They don't have as many needs. They don't have as many barriers. And so we don't have to spend all of our correctional resources with them. The higher-risk people are more likely to come back, so we have a higher chance of making a larger impact on them and lowering that recidivism rate and improving that outcome. So the other question I have for you all is any ideas of why we don't want to over-service low-risk people? Specifically, research has shown that if we over-service low-risk people, we could potentially make them worse, or at the very least, not help them. And why do you all think that is? If you have any guesses, what happens if we over-service low-risk people? It can overwhelm them with what they need to do. Overwhelming, exactly. It's often one of the things is oftentimes these individuals don't have that many needs or barriers. If we're providing them a bunch of services, it's basically providing them education or resources on things they don't need. Another thing is they often have positive things going on in their lives, enable them, having them become dependent, takes away self-sufficiency, exactly. Things like that. If we're providing them with too many services, we're taking them away from the things that make them pro-social in the first place. That they have the ability to maybe problem solve. They have the ability to avoid peer pressure. They have a good family life potentially. They like going to school potentially. And if we're providing them with too many services, we're taking them away from these things. Another thing that can happen is we're exposing them to a bunch of individuals who are at higher risk. If you're putting them in group services with higher risk individuals, then you're exposing them to thoughts, ideas, behaviors, to friends, acquaintances that are at more risk to recidivate, which can eventually potentially tangle them in that net, causing them to kind of have an increased risk level. And so the last question I have for you about the risk principle is, do you guys think there is what's the best way to phrase this? Is there an association between the severity of someone's offense and risk level? Are those the same thing? Someone's severity of their offending behavior and their risk level? Just a simple yes or no in the chat. No. And guys, I'm seeing lots of no's. You guys are smart. Yes, absolutely. High-risk people can commit very serious offenses, but that's not always the case. We know that high-risk people can commit somewhat low-level offenses, and that low-risk people can commit pretty heinous or severe offenses. And just because they commit just because they're high risk doesn't mean that they committed the most serious offenses. That brings us to the need principle, and the need principle tells us what we should be focusing on with the services we provide. And what it tells us is that when we're talking about rehabilitative services, services specifically aimed at changing behavior, we want to focus on criminogenic needs, or what we refer to as dynamic risk factors. Dynamic risk factors are factors in an individual's life that can change. So that's like something like employment. If someone is currently unemployed or not enrolled in school, we can provide them with services, job training, vocational skills. We can interview preps, resume building, right? We can provide them with services to help them become employed. Static risk factors are factors in someone's life that we cannot change. So for instance, having previous involvement in the criminal justice system or the juvenile justice system, having a felony arrest record. That's something that can be a predictive factor of whether or not someone will come back to the system, but we can't provide a service to target someone's arrest history. And so what it says is we want to focus our rehabilitative services on criminogenic needs. For time's sake, I'm just going to kind of move. I was going to ask you guys to talk about what you all believe the criminogenic needs are. So just quickly, as I'm transitioning to the slide, think in your head what you think are criminogenic needs. What are those risk factors that are predictive of whether or not someone will recidivate or whether someone becomes involved in the system in the first place? And what research has shown us is that there's 8 key criminogenic risks and needs. And I will pull them up on this slide. And the need principle focuses on these 8, and I want to highlight a couple things here first. This term antisocial appears a lot on the slides here, and I just want to make a quick clarification because I know sometimes this gets confused, that there's the difference between antisocial and asocial. They're kind of used interchangeably sometimes. Asocial means like I don't want to be around people, I don't want to be in public, I want to be by myself. Antisocial means against conventional society or against conventional norms. So when we're thinking about offending behavior, most instances, antisocial behavior is a criminal behavior by the legal code. But antisocial doesn't necessarily have to be criminal behavior. And I'll just give a really easy example. Something like falling asleep, right? Falling asleep in your daily life is not a criminal behavior on its own, or it's not an antisocial behavior on its own. But there are situations where falling asleep could be antisocial. If you fall asleep at work, it's usually not allowed, right? That's usually not something that's accepted in a work environment, and so that would be considered antisocial. Falling asleep while driving would be antisocial, also criminal, but that's besides the point. So antisocial just means going against kind of conventional norms. And so the first factor listed here, history of antisocial behavior, is a static-only factor, meaning that that is something that is not a criminogenic need. We can't provide services to this. And so a history of antisocial behavior is simply the idea that people who've been involved in criminal behaviors or antisocial behaviors in the past are more likely to do it again in the future. In all types of human behavior, everything from psychology, education, anywhere in human behavior, one of the best predictors of future behavior is past behavior. The second one, antisocial cognitions, is about our thought process. Antisocial attitudes, having values, having beliefs that go kind of against traditional society. And the easiest way I like to exemplify this risk is to think about this situation. If you walk outside your office, your house, wherever you're at today, and there's a car parked on the street and you happen to glance inside it, and you see sitting in the car, the keys clearly there, as well as a wallet that has like a fat stack of cash inside it, very visible. And I want you to think about the thoughts that would be going through your head. And then I want you to compare that just in your own mind to the thoughts that would be going through a high-risk kid or young adult that you've worked with recently. And think about the differences of those thoughts. And what I'm hope you're saying is that for the more quote unquote pro-social person, the people who aren't involved in the system typically, most of our thoughts are going to be more of kind of that pro-social. Things like, oh, I hope no one steals that wallet. Hopefully they get back to their car soon. Maybe even things like, maybe I should go find someone to tell them. Maybe I should try to find the person. And that doesn't mean that we won't have those, what we call intrusive thoughts, percolate into our minds, right? We might think for a moment, ooh, I wonder how much money that is. Or oh, it would be really nice to have a couple $100 right away all of a sudden. It's not that we'll never have those intrusive thoughts, but what dominates our thinking patterns, those quick thoughts that we almost don't even recognize, are those more pro-social thoughts. Whereas our high-risk kids are more likely to have those thoughts of like, oh, this person deserves it. If I don't take this money, someone else will. Oh, I need this money for X, Y, and Z, right? They're going to think more of those antisocial, those intrusive thoughts are going to dominate their thought processes more. Antisocial associates is relatively self-explanatory. It's hanging around people. It's peer pressure, right? It's being around friends, associates that can get them into trouble. Antisocial personality patterns, I want to make very clear, is not an antisocial personality disorder. What we mean here are characteristics of a person that might make them more likely to be involved in offending-like behavior. And so that can be things like having poor anger management, having trouble controlling emotions, things like being narcissistic, and it can also be things like being a risk taker or being impulsive. And those things aren't inherently antisocial. You can be a pro-social risk taker. I'm sure there's many of you all on this call. But more than likely, you scratch that risk maybe by doing things, I don't know, like rock climbing or ATV riding or making risky financial investments. There's a difference between your risk taking and your impulsiveness manifesting in a pro-social way versus manifesting in, I'm going to go drive a car 90 miles per hour on a 35 mile per hour street, or I'm going to go rob this or burglarize this house because there doesn't look like anyone's home and there's clearly some nice stuff in there. Family and marital circumstances is everything from a lack of family, a lack of social support, to having antisocial social support or having dysfunctional relationships with your family members. School and work is pretty self-explanatory, but I will note that it goes beyond simply having a job and simply going to school, right? Director Garrett was talking about a little bit as well, but it's really about having fulfilled education or employment values, like having fulfillment in your employment, gaining fulfillment in your educational work. Substance abuse, pretty self-explanatory, but I will note there's a difference between substance use and substance abuse. Just because a kid has a drug charge or has used substances in the past does not necessarily mean they have a substance abuse need. And then finally, leisure and recreation. What are you doing in your free time? Do you have pro-social things you can be involved in, after school activities, community activities, church activities, or religious activities? Or are you going to the park and smoking weed with friends? Are you spending all your time at friends' houses? Things like that. And I do want to ask the question just rhetorically. I'm not going to look at the chat, but feel free to put it in the chat if you would like to. Just whether or not, kind of yes or no, if you were surprised that mental health was not a criminogenic need. So just kind of think about that for a moment in your own mind. And maybe some of you were aware that mental health is not a criminogenic need or not considered a criminogenic need. Others, it might be surprising. And what I'll say about mental health is research time and time again has shown that it is not a direct and consistent predictor of criminal behavior. What that means is that addressing mental health on its own is unlikely going to lead to a situation where a person with a mental health issue will avoid future criminal behavior. However, it's the same thing on the other side. If we ignore mental health, our probability or our ability to target these other factors, these 7 criminogenic need factors, becomes a lot harder. So we can't ignore mental health. Just because it's not a criminogenic need doesn't mean that it's not vitally important to the rehabilitation process, to the reentry process, and so on. And what that really does is transition us into the next principle, which is the responsivity principle. The responsivity principle tells us how we can go about providing treatment to justice-involved individuals. And the general responsivity principle says that there are certain ways that we can provide interventions to the most number of people. That there are certain practices that work well for the greatest number of people, everyone from young adults to juveniles to older individuals to men and women to individuals with mental health issues and so on and so forth. And mostly what this research has shown is that cognitive, behavioral, and social learning-based interventions are the most effective types of services. Cognitive gets into that thought behavior process, the idea of linking the idea that our thoughts and values influence how we behave. Behavioral really gets into talking about how individuals learn from consequences of their behavior and how we can shape and modify behavior through the consequences of our actions. And then social learning really just gets into this idea that people need to learn skills and techniques to help them manage their lives and manage those risky situations. Specific responsivity, on the other hand, really is where we can kind of make this connection between the R&R model and reentry. And the specific responsivity principle says we need to pay attention when providing services, when supervising individuals, to the unique circumstances of the individual. And what that means is twofold. We need to recognize and address barriers, and we need to recognize and leverage strengths. So barriers would be, from an R&R perspective, barriers would be anything that could get in the way of someone having an effective rehabilitative treatment. A strength would be anything that could get in the way or anything that could enhance the likelihood of a rehabilitative program being successful for an individual. And so we can look at that the same way with the reentry. Reentry, a barrier to reentry would be anything that can make it more difficult for them to be successful upon reentry, and strengths would be anything that can make them more likely to be successful. And so when we focus on the R&R model, there are a series of common responsivity factors. And what you'll notice, I'll just kind of leave this up here, is that these responsivity factors, these barriers or strengths to treatment, look a lot like those barriers that we were talking about with reentry. Everything from transportation to housing to motivation to mental health, trauma and abuse, culture, cognitive skills, and so on. And these is not an exhaustive list. But the idea here is that if we don't pay attention to these things, we aren't going to be able to deliver effective treatment around those criminogenic needs, or we're not going to be able to expect that our kids are successful when they reenter society. And so Director Garrett was talking about it with basic needs, right? How can we expect for kids or young adults to address their substance abuse or avoid risky peers if they don't even have access to basic food or shelter otherwise, or they don't have transportation anywhere? And so just to give some examples about how these function from a responsivity standpoint, transportation could be a barrier. If someone doesn't have any access to transportation, how can we refer them to a substance abuse program in the community that's 20 minutes from where they're living? Versus someone who has good access to transportation, well, we have this substance abuse program we can refer them to, and they have the ability to get there. So let's take advantage of that. Mental health, again, something that's extremely important here. If someone has unstabilized mental health, how can we expect them to sit down in an anger management program or in an employment program, right? And really take in that treatment and really try to buy into that if their mental health is unstabilized. Whereas if we're able to stabilize their mental health, well, that's a great time to provide them with that programming around their substance use, around their employment needs, because they're in a stable place. And so it's a lot of the same things with reentry. How do we amplify or recognize these barriers and help them navigate it? And how do we acknowledge those strengths and allow them those strengths to make their time in the community easier? So it is a research-like presentation, so I did want to provide at least one slide of research just to give some background here on why the R&R model is important. And so what this graph shows is a graph, it's a meta-analysis, so it's a study of studies. So it's taking a bunch of different studies. This is on juvenile programs, reentry programs, community programs. So this isn't just on reentry. I want to make that clear. but it encompasses a ton of correctional programs from the juvenile and criminal justice system. And it basically said, were these programs adhering to the R&R model? And if so, how much reduction in recidivism were they seeing with their clients? So on the horizontal axis here, the left to right, we see the number of principles met. So 0 indicates they met neither risk, need, or responsivity. 1 means they met 1 of the 3. 2 means 2 of the 3. And 3 means 3 of the 3. And what we can see here is that when they met on the vertical axis, then up and down, we see the percent change in recidivism. So higher bars indicate we're seeing greater reductions in recidivism. Lower bars mean lower reductions in recidivism, or if it goes below the 0, it actually means increases in recidivism. So correctional programs that adhere to none of the principles increase recidivism, very slightly, but they increase recidivism, as opposed to providing them with no correctional services, putting them on just supervision only. Then we start to see, though, the percent reduction in recidivism increase significantly from about 3% for one of the principles to 18% for 2 of the principles and 26% for all 3. Just highlighting that we do see great reductions in recidivism when agencies adhere to these principles. The last kind of R&R centric thing I wanted to talk about today is this idea of fidelity. And fidelity is this kind of fourth part of the R&R model, falls under the larger idea of the principles of effective intervention. And what fidelity says is, how well are you providing services? And fidelity is not just a term in the R&R model. It's a term, an idea in business, in economics, in education, in psychology, in social work, and so on. All it is this idea that regardless if you're providing cognitive behavioral interventions, mental health interventions, it could be the Uber program that Director Garrett was talking about. Are you adhering, or are you taking that mechanism, that curriculum, that idea, and are you doing what you're supposed to be doing with it? And what research has shown in all fields is that if you deliver well positioned, meaning evidence-based curriculum in whatever field you're talking about, and you deliver it with fidelity, you're likely to see successful outcomes. So reductions in recidivisms, reductions in substance use, improvements in mental health, whatever it might be. Whereas if you have poor fidelity, that can lead to no improvement or even negative effects. And with all that is, we can't always assume fidelity, and we should be monitoring fidelity. And I like to highlight this idea with fidelity with 2 examples. One's a sports example, and one's a weightlifting example. So I'll start with the weightlifting example. This idea that, hey, poor fidelity can be really harmful. And we see that with weightlifting. Weightlifting is something that's supposed to be physically healthy, can also be very mentally healthy. And maybe besides picking the appropriate weight to do a weightlifting exercise with, the next most important thing is probably your form, right? The idea that if whether you're working out your legs, your back, your arms, whatever it might be, there's a certain form you should be doing. And when you do that form correctly, you're going to get the most kind of bang for your buck for doing that exercise. You're going to get the most impact on whatever muscle you're exercising. But as your form starts to drift, starts to get worse and worse, you'll start to see you don't get as much effect, right? If you could still be doing the exercise, but the effects you should be seeing are going to be muted. And if your form gets so bad, what can happen? You can get injured. You can hurt yourself from weightlifting. So you take something that's supposed to be helpful, and by doing it incorrectly, you've now made it harmful. And so it's the same thing here when we talk about our services we're providing to young adults. It can be the best designed mental health program, cognitive behavioral program, housing program. But if the staff aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, if we're not connecting youth with the right resources, if we're picking the wrong type of youth to be involved in the services, if management isn't pulling their weight to allow the service to be successful, we're going to make something that should be helping our clients and potentially making it ineffective, or potentially making them even worse. And the other important thing about fidelity is we need to monitor it, and we need to keep an eye on it. And if we don't, we can experience drift, which can get us towards those negative outcomes. And so the example I like to use of why that's important here is sports. If we think about the best athletes in the world, and I'll use an athlete. I like him as a person. I respect him as a person, but from an athlete, I didn't enjoy watching him. And that's Steph Curry. I'm from Cleveland and a big Cavs fan. I'm hoping there's some of you on the call. So Steph Curry was our mortal enemy for the Cavs for 4 years during the LeBron years, the second time around. And the point being is Steph Curry is the best shooter in the world. And there's no one in this world that's a better shooter than him, in my opinion, and I would think most people's opinion. And yet Steph Curry has a shooting coach. Why does Steph Curry have a shooting coach? No one, that shooting coach can't make him a better shooter necessarily. But what that shooting coach does is watch Steph's fidelity to his shooting form really closely. So that as soon as his elbow is starting to stick out a little bit more, or his legs aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, the coach can say, hey, Steph, I noticed this on film. Let's fix it. So you can continue to being the best that you are. And so fidelity to these programs that we offer, again, whether it's services in prison, services during reentry, community services, if we don't monitor them, if we don't do them with fidelity, we're going to see issues that come up with them. Okay. So I just threw a lot at you with the R&R model. And what I want to acknowledge very open is that the R&R model is not a model of reentry success, right? It is not something that's specifically designed to help young adults improve their chance of reentry. It is a model of correctional rehabilitation that has been shown to work across all levels of criminal justice or juvenile justice involvement. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to always be successful for someone on reentry. So how do we get there? How do we put this R&R model into practice? And so what I did is I connected the R&R model with other research on effective strategies of reentry. And I kind of came up with this mantra. I threw this together in a couple minutes as I was thinking this through. This is not a thing from research. This is just something I put together based on the research that we know about, that we conduct at UCCI, as well as what I reviewed. And what that means is there's almost this 3 Ps to reentry. It says or reentry. I apologize. You should say to reentry. And it's prepare or plan, practice or rehearse, and then persist. And this really gets into this idea, connecting all the way back to Director Garrett's conversation and all that. It's just this idea that there's a lot going on for these young adults. They're faced with so many challenges. They don't have their basic needs met. They're facing these risk situations. So how do we go about helping them? How do we put them in the best situation that they can access those basic research? They can avoid or overcome those barriers so they can effectively work on those criminogenic risks and needs. Well, the first thing we need to do is help them prepare or plan for it. The second thing we do is help them practice or rehearse those situations that they might face. And then the third one is to continue that work or persist with that work when they're actually re-entering society. And so to provide some specifics here about how do we actually put this prepare, practice, and persist into practice, well, what research has shown consistently is that we want to begin preparing for re-entry early. And I'll come back to this point here in a second. And the second one is to conduct assessments. And some of you may be rolling your eyes at assessments. I know not everyone is always a fan of assessments, so I want to make it clear here. I'm talking about 3 different types of assessments to properly prepare our kids, help our kids prepare, or young adults prepare for reentry. The first is those risk and need assessments, the ODYS, the ORAS, what those might be, getting an idea of those central 8 criminogenic risk and needs. The second type of assessments are those responsivity assessments. So responsivity assessments would be any factor that doesn't fall under those central 8 criminogenic risk and needs. Mental health assessments, reading level assessments, cognitive ability assessments, whatever it might be. And then the third type of assessments is your professional discretion, your professional assessment of working with the individual. Through your conversation, what do you learn about them that you can use to help them prepare for reentry? By talking to them, do you see a clear barrier like, hey, when they get out or now that they're out, I can clearly tell they don't have access to transportation, or their housing situation is going to be really rough because they're going home to a place where their mom or their dad or their brother or sister is a drug user or is a gang member or whatever it might be. So your own professional discretions. Getting an idea of what are those criminogenic risk and needs the client possesses, and what are those responsivity factors, those barriers, and those strengths that our client possesses. Maybe by talking to them, you learn they have access to transportation. Hey, you learn that they have a great family support system. So let's prepare to leverage those strengths as well. The next comes create case and reentry plans. To be clear here, what I mean by a case plan in this instance, your case plans, you might use these terminologies interchangeably. You might use them in a combination of one. But a case plan, just in this context, what I mean are case plans around providing services to those criminogenic risk and needs, or those really important responsivity factors that you need services for. Mental health, maybe trauma and abuse, maybe things like cognitive ability. But it's idea of, hey, while they're under our supervision, what types of services can we provide them or connect them with to work on those areas? The reentry plans in this case, what I mean is more of those barriers to reentry, or those factors you know they're going to have to account for when they get into society. Where are they going to get their state ID? How are they going to get access to housing, transportation, food, shelter, things like that? And what research has shown from the case planning perspective, from a targeting those criminogenic needs and key non-criminogenic needs, is the earlier you start that in their supervision process, the better, the more effective it has a chance of being. So if a 16-year-old comes into the system and is in prison or in incarceration for 5 years, as early in that 5 years as they can start working on those criminogenic needs, those non-criminogenic needs that need help, the more likely you are to make an impact on them, and therefore the less likely they are going to be a factor that determines their reentry success when they get out. Reentry plans, on the other hand, also say that the earlier we start it, the better. What that doesn't mean is if someone goes into prison for 10 years, we don't necessarily need to start reentry planning day one, but it also doesn't mean we need to wait till a couple weeks before they're released. As they start getting somewhat near release, really when they start thinking about their time in the outside, whether that's 2 years, 18 months, 12 months from release, let's start planning. Let's start recognizing, hey, transportation is going to be an issue for you. Housing is going to be an issue for you. You're going to need a state ID. Well, let's start talking about and figuring out the resources in the area you plan to go back to. Let's figure out those resources. Let's identify them. Let's create plans to help them figure out how they're going to address those things. As early as possible, you can really, the more you do it, the more likely you are to identify those barriers. And if you can't overcome them, you can hopefully help them find ways to work around them. Which then brings us into the second part, which is the practice. And the first one, and this kind of goes hand in hand with the case planning, but it's just more about how we're servicing youth, these next two. The first one is use risk management plans. And that is identifying the people, the places, and the things that get your client into trouble. And then practicing and rehearsing ways to either avoid those situations, those people, those places, and things in general, or at the very least, manage those situations, right? Because it's inevitable that a client's going to get released from prison and they're going to be faced with a situation, whether from a family member, whether from a friend, an old acquaintance, who's going to try to get them to do something that can get them into trouble. And so think about any skill that you're good at, everything from cooking to playing sports to playing music to your current jobs. How did you get good at it? You practice it. And again, I like to use sports here. Athletes don't do stuff for the first time when they're in a game situation. They do it the first time in practice. They work on it in practice over and over again. So when they get in the game situation, it's a little bit easier. Does it mean it's always going to be successful? Does it mean that new play, that new move that they worked on is going to work? Not necessarily, but it increases the chance that it's going to. So if our kids are able to practice managing and avoiding those situations in the institution or under supervision in the community, when they actually face those situations in the community, they're more likely to be able to overcome that. We want to address barriers with the youth, so help them problem solve around those different areas that they're going to be facing, whether that's barriers like mental health or barriers like transportation. We want to leverage strengths. We want to identify those strengths. If they have a good family support system, if they have a good housing situation when they get out, if they have good cognitive ability, let's leverage those, and hopefully it helps with treatment. Hopefully it helps with those reentry plans. And then we want to consistently update those case and reentry plans. So as progress is made, as steps are checked off, let's update those. And that way we can continue to plan, we can continue to find new things to work on, or to work on them in different ways. So we need to practice with our youth. And then we need to persist or to continue. Research has demonstrated that, especially for higher risk individuals, releasing them from institutions and putting them right back into the community, it is very, very difficult for them to stay out of trouble and to remain successful upon reentry. So how do we go about helping that? Well, that's where we persist. So the first thing is to discharge plan. This is mainly for individuals who will be stepping down in their supervision. So going from prison to a residential facility, or prison to post-release control, or residential facility to community supervision. Having discharge plans that kind of summarize those case plans, the reentry plans. What has the youth been working on, or the young adult been working on while they've been incarcerated? What are they still need to work? What do they still need to work on? What have they overcome, or what have they identified in the reentry plan, and what strides have they made to make reentry more successful? And what services should they be connected with? We talked about working together at the outset of this event today, this presentation period today, working together, that we're all in this together to create opportunities for youth, to encourage youth. Well, discharge planning is a great way to do that, because it provides them with a summary of what they've accomplished and where they need to go. It then allows different agencies who are working with this individual to communicate, to know what's happening with them, so they can continue that work. Because otherwise, if post-release control has no idea what that person did while they were in prison or at a residential facility, they may start over. They may provide them with services they don't need, or that they've already worked on, and so on. And then the last two, identify and connect individuals with services, with community services and resources, and aftercare, right? That gets into everything from basic needs. Hey, do they have a place to stay? Do they have the ability to find clothing, to get access to food, to get access to transportation, or to job skills? And this is especially important for this population we're talking about, the young adults, because they didn't have the opportunity, like someone who may have gone into the system at a slightly older age, to gain job skills over their teenage years, to develop socially, to develop certain values, beliefs, or knowledge of how the community works, how society works. They don't have the ability to problem solve to the best of their ability within the community, because they've never faced that, because they've been involved in the system. So connecting them with educational, vocational, psychological, mental health, all these different services can be especially important. And then the last one before I kind of finish up is aftercare. Aftercare from both the supervision, but more so that rehabilitative services. Continuing to work on those key criminogenic need areas, those key non-criminogenic need areas. We might have stabilized their substance abuse issues in prison, but now what's going to happen when they're back in the community and they're faced with maybe some different types of opportunities to use substances? How are they going to continue to stay sober? We've stabilized their mental health in the community. Well, how are we going to ensure their mental health stays stable, or in prison? How are we going to ensure that it stays stable in the community? Continuing that service after they get out as much as possible. And so I'm about out of time, and I do want to leave a couple minutes for questions if people have any. So I'll just kind of pull up these summary slides as I finish up. And I just want to say this presentation was developed from a research perspective. But one of the great things I'll say selfishly, and a plug about UCCI, is we're not just stuck in research. We work with agencies and with people involved in the system every single day. And so, yes, this is a research presentation, but it also comes from a practical standpoint, recognizing that data and numbers don't always tell the whole story. And with that said, this is still a research presentation. And so it's a lot easier to say, plan, practice, and persist than it is to do in practice in reality. So what I'm really looking forward to is these next series of presentations after our break that are really going to talk about taking some of these ideas that I talked about today and actually putting them into action. The Uber program that Director Garrett talked about, and so many more that these next speakers throughout the rest of today and tomorrow are going to talk about. Really talking about how we can provide opportunities, how we can encourage youth, how we can provide them with mentorship opportunities to help them address some of these needs and some of these barriers to reentry. And so I will stop there and just say thank you so much for your attention and for your participation in the few times I asked for it. And if you do have any questions, I'm happy to talk about them today. I'm also happy to answer any questions over email, offline. We can connect over Zoom, over email, whatever it might be. But thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Chris, I did want to point out one comment in the chat from Reba, who mentioned co-laboring. And as you were going through the 3 Ps, that's really an opportunity for us to co-labor with our partners. I like that the practice, persist, prepare really tied in what you asked the participants to put in the chat at the very beginning. What are some of the barriers? What does it look like to successfully reintegrate back into the community? The only thing I wanted to add before I turn it back over to Reba is that you did a great job of connecting really what it would look like for our young people and what we should be focusing on as we prepare them for reentry. Keeping in mind that for a lot of our youth, the process that they've gone through isn't just about rehabilitation, but for some it's habilitation. It's teaching them, it's helping them learn how to navigate those next steps in life. So thank you so much. Truly appreciate your presentation today. And we are at time. I will hand it back over to Reba to see if we have an opportunity for other questions and comments. Thank you.
Yes, we are at time. Actually, I have 1 minute left. So are there any questions? I know there was a question in the chat, Dr. D'Amato, if you could put your email in the chat. People were requesting that as well. But any questions for Dr. D'Amato? And yeah, thank you so much, Dr. D'Amato, for that thorough and applicable work. So great. Anything?
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So we appreciate that. Any questions? You can come off mute or you could raise your hand. Kudos, wonderful presentation. Thank you. So
I have a question.
great.
Yes.
Can you hear me? Ooh, I don't know why it's that.
We can hear you. You're a little echoey, but we can hear you. Now we're getting a lot of static.
I'll just put it in the chat.
Perfect. Thank you,
Okay.
Damien.
Great. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I wanted. I appreciate that. I appreciate your work and everything that you put together. The question that I wanted to ask was, how often do you utilize peer support with individuals re-entering into the community? Because one of the things when a person's coming back into the community, and like you said, they go through the programs, and hopefully that individual is active in their recovery while they're in there. While they're actively incarcerated, they're active in their recovery, doing what they need to do. And it's not a fake it till you make it. It's one of those things where I am actually applying myself. Then when I get out here and the resources are there and I am activating these resources. So utilizing peer support helps an individual recognize the difference from going from coping with the triggers to living with my recovery? Because coping with my triggers was more so about trying to learn how to cope with what I felt when I felt like using. But during the process, because I was locked up as a juvenile, and even as an adult, so coming out as a juvenile, learning to cope, learning to manage my recovery
Yeah.
and learning how to share it without feeling as though I'm the outcast of everybody, you know, because there are some relationships that you have as a peer. I mean, as a person, all the relationships weren't bad. So helping individuals learn how to manage their recovery versus with uh coping with trying to exist in the community.
Yeah.
Is there a process that you work with individuals with that? Like we
Yeah,
using
so
peer support?
I will say I'll answer that in two ways. So first, from a peer support perspective, what I will say, whether it's related to substance abuse or just kind of dealing with the challenge of reentry in general, is what research has consistently shown is the presence of social support, positive social support is such a key factor for reentry. Having peers, families, mentors, whoever it might be, who are there to help navigate, help deal with substance abuse issues, help deal with those other issues is a very key aspect of someone being able to successfully reenter society, especially from the like I feel like I belong perspective. As for your other question about more of managing and coping, yes, UCCI, we kind of create two types of interventions that we use when working with people with substance abuse or otherwise. One is kind of those emotional regulation skills. So how do you manage your own emotions? Then the other one is managing situations. So maybe you have it under control. Like I know that I can, if I'm on my own, be able to say no to my urge to use or urge to do this. But we also teach what we call social skills. And that's okay, I'm in this situation now. I'm out in the community. I'm back out trying to live my life. And all of a sudden, I'm faced with certain situations where in the past I would use, or in the past I would turn to this. And we teach those skills to try to give them different ways to manage those situations. And so it's more of a practical, like, this is behaviorally how I'm going to handle this situation. And hopefully that in combination with those coping skills can help people avoid those situations or not get into the same situations they got into in the past. I don't know if that doesn't fully answer your question, please let me know.
And then there was one question about the effectiveness of using credible messengers in delivery of services. Is there any research on that?
Can you clarify? So credible messengers, is that, I'm not 100% sure of what that exactly means. Maybe does anyone know that can?
Those are individuals who have the lived
Okay,
experience.
that's what I kind of figured. I refer them more just like peer support. Research on that is somewhat unclear. However, what I can say is that from the qualitative perspective, people see great value in it. And so what I'll say, it's unclear from the reduction recidivism perspective of like having someone who's a peer support. Like we see it a lot in prisons, right? Especially people who are lifers who now are kind of turned positive will become peer supports for younger people in prison. The effectiveness of that on, reducing recidivism is it's not bad. It's just not clear. What we've seen in research consistently, though, is that the people who go through those see tremendous value in that from a relationship building connection standpoint, from increasing their confidence, their motivation. So there's clear evidence that that stuff does help individuals from more than intrinsic motivation, from belief in themselves, from having a support system they can reach out to.
Great, thank you. And Ruth Samira gave the definition, the official definition of credible messenger. So Wendy Tarr, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, when you say that the data isn't clear, is that because there's been a lot of research on it and the data from that research isn't clear, or is that there hasn't been a lot of research on it and it's something that just hasn't had the attention of researchers to date?
It's a little bit of in between both of those. It's not that there's no research. It's more so it's just a convoluted thing to try to research, because peer support, or that the term, I'm trying to use the right term, credible messengers, is just, it's hard to define those because they can look so different in different situations. And so how, like, a prison could have a peer support system, but the people that volunteer might not actually be credible, but they can call them credible. So I don't think there's been a lot of good ways to measure like kind of the fidelity of those programs. If we get back to that idea of fidelity, that we don't really know what's happening with those services and know if they're effective. So it's probably more so mixed of there's a lot of good programs that could be producing positive results and a lot of not so good programs that are producing negative results. And it's kind of convoluting the overall evidence is what is my interpretation of the research. Other people could disagree with that, but that's my interpretation.
Okay. All right, we want to give people a break. So it's 10:37. We are going to come back at 10:45. I did put in the chat for those who read that. We're going to quote unquote reset the room. And so we're going to move everybody into the waiting room. If you want to leave your Zoom link open, you can do that. We'll move everybody into the waiting room and reset the room and reopen it once our next set of presenters come into the space. So again, thank you, Yolanda. Thank you, Dr. D'Amato, for the amazing work and for the information. It's really got us level set, is what I like to say, a better understanding of where we need to go for the rest of the day. And hopefully for all of you who heard and were part of this presentation, that you can start to see like what you need to be looking for, right? And particularly those last slides around the the plan, the plan, the practice, and the persistence, right? If you don't have something in any of those, who do you need to find that does? So with that being said, again, thank you, Yolanda. Thank you, Chris. And we are going to stop recording.